Identity foreclosure. For most of your adult life, a simple question had an automatic answer. What do you do? You had a title, a role, a reason to get up. Psychologists call the collapse of that, when a major life identity disappears and nothing replaces it, identity foreclosure. And here's the part that surprises people. Researchers studying retirement adjustment have found it isn't the underachievers who struggle most. It's often the opposite. One study on identity distress found that people who were forced into retirement, pushed out before they were ready, showed significantly higher psychological distress than those who chose to retire on their own terms. Not because they were weak, because they'd built more of their identity into the role and lost it without warning. The bigger the role, the bigger the hole it leaves. But to understand why this hits so hard, you have to go back further than the retirement party. The origin, how work became the self. Nobody plans to fuse their identity with their job. It happens slowly, one ordinary day at a time. For decades, work gave you something almost nothing else does. Daily proof that you matter. A problem you solved. A meeting where people actually listened. A skill only you had. Every workday was a small transaction. Effort in. Evidence out. Maybe you learned early, long before any job, that being useful was how you earned approval. That sitting still looked like laziness. That your value showed up in what you produced, not in who you were when you weren't producing anything at all. So you built a life and a self that ran on output. And it worked. For 30, 40 years, it worked beautifully. Then one day, the evidence stopped arriving. No meetings. No deliverables. No one asking for the one thing only you understood. And the self that was built on that evidence didn't know how to stand without it. That's not a character flaw. That's architecture doing exactly what it was built to do. Collapsing when its foundation gets pulled out. Sign 1. The calendar goes blank, and so does the day. For decades, your time wasn't yours to structure. It was structured for you. Meetings, deadlines, commutes, shift changes. You probably complained about all of it. But underneath the complaining, that structure was making 1,000 small decisions for you every day, so you didn't have to. Retire, and suddenly every one of those decisions is yours. What do I do at 9 a.m.? At 2 p.m.? At all. A full day with no shape to it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like drift. By 10 a.m. you've made coffee, checked the news twice, and you're standing in your kitchen wondering what you're supposed to do with the other 14 hours. This is why so many retirees describe being busier and more aimless at the same time. You fill the hours, errands, chores, a project around the house, and still end the day with the nagging feeling that none of it meant anything. That's because filling time and structuring time aren't the same thing. A job didn't just occupy your hours. It gave them a hierarchy, some things urgent, some important, some that could wait. Without that hierarchy, every hour weighs roughly the same. And a day with no weighted hours starts to feel strangely heavy instead of light. Sign 2. The mirror stops working. For years, your competence had a mirror. A boss, a client, a team, a paycheck. Something that reflected back. Yes, you're still good at this, you still matter here. Retirement removes the mirror, but leaves the question. Am I still good at anything? Does anyone still need what I have? Picture the specific moment. You used to walk into a room and people's posture would change. They'd ask your opinion, wait to hear your read before deciding. Now you walk into a room, a grocery store, a family dinner, a waiting room, and nobody's posture changes at all. You're just a person in a room. That's not an insult from the world. It's simply what happens when the role that used to announce your competence isn't attached to you anymore. But if you spent 40 years reading that posture change as proof you mattered, its sudden absence can feel like proof of the opposite, even though nothing about your actual worth moved an inch. Sign 3. The social network was the job, and nobody warned you. You probably didn't think of your coworkers as your social life. They were just the people around you. The morning chat by the coffee machine. The work friend who got your specific kind of tired joke. Retire, and that entire layer of human contact disappears overnight. Not because the relationships ended, because the structure that made them automatic did. Maintaining a friendship on purpose takes effort in a way that bumping into someone at work never did. A lot of people who retire broken aren't isolated by choice. They're isolated because an entire social infrastructure quietly vanished the same week their job did, and nobody replaced it. Sign 4. Rest doesn't feel like rest anymore. This is the one that confuses people most. You spent years dreaming about doing nothing. Now you can do nothing, all day, every day, and it doesn't feel good. It feels uncomfortable, almost guilty. If your sense of worth was built on output, the absence of output doesn't register as peace. It registers as a threat. For years your brain got small, regular hits of accomplishment. Now there's nothing to replace them. So a perfectly restful Tuesday afternoon can feel, underneath the surface, like something is wrong. Not because something is wrong. Because the brain hasn't learned yet that rest is allowed to be the whole point. The turn, what actually fixes this? Here's the part most retirement advice gets wrong. It tells you to stay busy. Take up golf, volunteer, travel. And sometimes that helps. But busyness alone doesn't fix this. Because the problem was never a lack of activities. It was the loss of two specific things, a structure for your day and a source for your identity that doesn't depend on a job title. Research on retirement adjustment has consistently pointed to the same 3 ingredients in people who land well: rebuilding identity, rebuilding social connection, and rebuilding a sense of independence. Not staying busy. Rebuilding, on purpose, the things retirement quietly took away. They build a loose structure back into the week. Not a job's worth of structure, just enough that a Tuesday has a shape. A standing morning walk. A class. A regular call with a grandchild. They find something that gives them the kind of feedback work used to give. Being needed by someone. Being good at something, in a domain that has nothing to do with their old career. Teaching a neighbor's kid to fish. Getting genuinely good at something they were always mediocre at while working. And, maybe hardest of all, they let their identity expand into something work was never going to hold. Who they are with their grandkids. What they're curious about. What they want to learn now simply because it's interesting, not because anyone is grading it. None of this happens automatically. Identity doesn't refill itself the way a calendar does. It has to be rebuilt, deliberately, the same way it was built the first time. Slowly. Through small proof points accumulating over months, not a single decision made on day one. That's not staying busy. That's quietly building a self that isn't standing on a job title anymore. The reframe. If some of this landed a little too close, you are not broken. And you didn't fail at retirement. You succeeded at exactly what you were trained to do for 40 years. Tie your worth to your usefulness. That's not a personal failure. That's just what happens to a person who spent 4 decades being told, in 1,000 small ways, that their value lives in their output. The people who eventually feel whole again in retirement aren't the ones who never struggled. They're the ones who realized the struggle wasn't proof something was wrong with them. It was proof of exactly how much of themselves they'd poured into work all those years. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to finally, carefully, rebuild from. If this is you, or someone you love who's gone quiet since they retired, tell me in the comments which one hit hardest. The blank calendar, the missing mirror, or the rest that doesn't feel like rest. I read every one. And if you know someone in their first year of retirement who's gone quiet, send them this. It might be exactly what they need to hear today.